Possible through the support of our museum members. To become a member, visit charlesrivermuseum.org/join. Please subscribe to follow us here on YouTube and hit like if you enjoyed this video.
Our Mill Talks program is made possible by a grant from the Lowell Institute, whose generosity has made possible free lectures throughout Greater Boston since 1836.
Hello, and welcome to the Charles River Museum's special holiday edition of our Mill Talk series. I'm Ilana Winkler. I'm one of the organizers of our annual seasonal event, the Dickens Holiday Festival, where we put on a full production of the classic tale, A Christmas Carol, and host 20 vendors selling unique or handmade wares. Now, some may think that holiday entertainment and shopping is not a fit for our core essence here at the museum, but I assure you, it is a perfect fit. For here, in one of the birthplaces of the American Industrial Revolution, we have the perfect backdrop to stage and showcase the human versus machine struggle. And what is Ebenezer Scrooge but the perfect machine for his industry, money lending? And like a machine, he is unfeeling, he is calculating, and he works on one sole purpose. And like Ebenezer Scrooge, how many workers within these very walls struggled with their own ghosts and spirits to feel more than just like a cog or a wheel in a larger mechanism. As the Industrial Revolution rolled on year after year, turning more handmade tasks into machine-made tasks, how many people struggled to feel the spirit of humanity, to be kind to others? We're not just a museum of machines. It's the human element too, whether it be triumph or failure, that is integral to our story. Now, I'd like to bring to the stage critically acclaimed local performer and historian J.T. Turner as he presents Charles Dickens, discussing his life, his work, his love of Christmas, and so much more. But stay tuned, because after the lecture, J.T. will answer questions live from you, the audience. Use the chat screen in your YouTube to submit your questions. And now, Mr. Charles Dickens.
Does no other profession occur to you which a young man of your figure and address could take up easily? No? Then I'll tell you one. The stage, the theatrical profession. I am in the theatrical profession. My wife is in the theatrical profession. My children are in the theatrical profession. I have a dog who lived and died in the theatrical profession, and my pony goes on this very afternoon in Timon of Athens. Had I not become a rather well-known author, I most assuredly would have become an actor. My parents tell me that as a small child, I would entertain them and their friends with my impersonations of people, with my singing, with my dancing. These days, I am able to feed that desire for a theatrical life with my lectures my tours, and my readings. My name is Charles John Huffam Dickens, or if you happen to be Mrs. Dickens, you may call me the Inimitable. It is my very great delight this evening to talk to you from this wonderful location, to which I have a connection that I shall share with you. And I am happy to tell you a bit about my life, read from some of my works, and perhaps we might have a seasonal enactment or two. I'd like to begin with a quote from Copperfield. Whether I shall turn out to be the hero of my own story, or whether someone else will have that station, these pages must show. I was born in Portsmouth, England. My parents, John and Elizabeth Dickens. I was the second of 8 children. My father was a clerk for the Royal Navy. I had a very, very happy childhood living there in Portsmouth. As I have already told you, I was a young actor as it was. I enjoyed my early childhood tremendously. The dreams of childhood, its airy fables, its graceful, beautiful, humane, impossible adornments of the world beyond, so good to be believed in once, so good to be remembered when outgrown. But not all of my childhood memories were pleasant. My father would find himself in financial difficulties on an all too regular basis. You can meet my father in David Copperfield in the character of Mr. Micawber. My dear young friend, I am older than you, a man of some experience in life, and of some experience in short, in difficulties, generally speaking, at present, and until something turns up, which I may say I am hourly expecting, I have nothing to bestow upon you but advice. In short, I am not sure how worth taking that advice is, since I have never taken it myself. And I am the miserable wretch you see before you. I say the miserable wretch. My advice is, never do tomorrow what you can do today. Procrastination is the thief of time. Collar him. My other piece of advice, Copperfield, you know, annual income £20, annual expenditures 19, and 6, result happiness. Annual income £20, annual expenditures £20, ought and 6, result misery. The blossom is blighted, the leaf is withered, the god of day goes down upon the dreary scene, and in short, you will find yourself flawed, as am I. We moved from Portsmouth to a part of London that was rather poor because of my father's financial difficulties. We moved to a place called Camden Town. Those of you that are familiar with my story, A Christmas Carol, will recognize Camden Town as the place where Bob Cratchit and his family resided. It was while we were there that my father was thrown into debtor's prison. As was customary at the time, my father was allowed to bring the family with him in to the prison to live there, all except for me. At the age of 12 years old, it was decided that I could go and make money for the family and try to reduce the debt that my father had accrued. And so at 12 years old, I was set to work at Warren's blacking factory. Some of my most horrible memories are of that place. I lived in a small garret room, and I could not sleep at night because I could hear the rats gnawing in the wall beside the place I rested my head. The boys at the factory treated me cruelly, called me the little gentleman, physically and mentally abused me, all except one boy. An older boy, his name was Bob Fagin, and you may recognize that name, Fagin, from one of my novels. It is a wonder to me how I could have been so easily cast away at such a young age. It is a wonder to me that even after my descent into the poor little drudge I had become since we came to London, no one had any compassion for me. The blacking warehouse was a crazy, tumble-down old house abutting a course of a river and literally overrun with rats. Its wainscoted rooms and its rotten floors and staircase and the old grey rats swarming in the cellar, and the sound of their squeaking and scuffling coming up the stairs at all times, and the dirt and the decay of the place rise up visibly before me as if I were there again. Those moments informed my life. My job was to take bottles of blacking, to wrap them in brown paper, paste labels upon them, trim them quickly. I became so good at this that the owner set me in a window on the street where passers-by might watch my work for their own amusement and entertainment. This was a form of acting that I did not like. Eventually, my father was freed from debtor's prison, but it was decided by my mother that I should remain at the blacking factory, that the money was useful to us. My time there finally ended when I was working busily in the window one day and looked up to behold my own father through the window, standing on the street, shamefaced, watching me. I was taken out that very day. Our family was still poor and struggling, and so it was decided there was only enough money for one of us to continue with our education, and it was decided my sister would go on with her education much though I desired it. But I was self-taught from the age of 12 on. I became a reporter, taught myself shorthand, and began reporting on parliamentary activities. I also began to write, and I sent some of my short stories off to various magazines and newspapers. But now my life is on a cusp, for there I am, a bit of a writer, but not a successful one yet. And a friend of mine approaches me and says, "Wouldn't you rather be an actor?" and arranges for me to have an audition for his theatrical company. But as fate would have it, the very day I was to have an audition, I had a terrible head cold and was unable to go. As I sent off a note saying I could not come to the audition, I received a letter from a magazine. One of my stories was accepted. Not only that, they desired more stories from me. I call these short pieces sketches, and I used the name Boz, Sketches by Boz. And on that day, I became a writer rather than an actor. These Sketches by Boz were very popular, and eventually I began putting them together in a long-form story called the Pickwick Papers. It was published in installment form and eventually as a book. "Heads! Heads! Take care of your heads!" cried the loquacious stranger as they came out under the archway, which in those days formed the entrance to the coach yard. "Terrible place, dangerous work. Other day, 5 children, mother, tall lady, eating sandwiches, forgot the arch, crash, knock, children look around, mother's head off, sandwich in her hand, no mouth to put it in. Head of family off, shocking, shocking. Sportsmen, sir? A little, sir. Fine pursuit, sir, fine pursuit. Dogs, sir? Not just now. Oh, you should keep dogs. Fine animals, sagacious creatures. Dog of my own once, Pointer, surprising instinct. Out shooting one day. Entered enclosure, whistled, whoo-hoo. Dog stopped, whistled again. Ponto! No go. Stock still, called him Ponto. Ponto! Wouldn't move, dog transfixed, staring at a board, looked up, saw an inscription, "Gamekeeper has orders to shoot all dogs found in this enclosure." Wouldn't pass it. Wonderful dog, valuable dog that, very. Oh, a singular circumstance that. Will you allow me to make a note of it? Certainly, sir. Certainly. 100 more anecdotes of the same animal. Oh, fine girl, sir. This was said to Mr. Tracy Tupman, who was bestowing sundry and anti-Pickwickian glances on a young lady on the roadside. Oh, very. English girls, not so fine as Spanish. Noble creatures, jet hair, black eyes, lovely forms, sweet creatures, beautiful. You have been to Spain, sir? Oh, live there. Ages, many conquests, sir. Conquest, thousands. Don Bolaro Fizgig, grandee, only daughter, Donna Christina. Splendid creature, love me to distraction. Jealous father, high-souled daughter, handsome Englishman. Donna Christina in despair. Prussic acid, stomach pump in my portmanteau, operation performed, old Bellaro in ecstasies, consents to our union, join hands, flood of tears, romantic story, very. Is the lady in England now, sir? Dead, sir, dead. Never recovered from the stomach pump, undermined her constitution, fell a victim. And her father? Remorse, misery, sudden disappearance, talk of the whole city, search made everywhere without success. Public fountain in the great square suddenly ceased playing. Weeks elapsed, still a stoppage, workmen employed to clean it, water drawn off, father-in-law discovered sticking head first in the main pipe, with a full confession in his right boot. Took him out. Fountain played away again as well as ever. Suddenly I found myself in my early 20s as a successful and rather well-known writer. At 23, I went to a party, and there I met the daughter of my editor. Her name was Catherine Hogarth. I fell instantly and deeply in love with her. And she, of course, was dazzled to meet the famous Charles Dickens. Well, if the truth be told, she wrote to a friend, "Mr. Dickens improves greatly on acquaintance." Nonetheless, we were married. Catherine and I have 10 children. It was during the course of many years after that that I wrote many in installment form my novels, Oliver Twist, Nicholas Nickleby, Old Curiosity Shop. I loved acting out my characters. In my writing room, I have a large, full-length mirror, and I will perform for myself all of the scenes that I am writing down in my book. As my children began to grow up, I also would enact scenes for them. Imagine, if you will, my 2 oldest boys getting into a coach with me, going for a ride together, going to a graveyard. And it was there that my 2 sons first met Magwitch from Great Expectations. Hold your noise. Keep still, you little devil, or I'll cut your throat. Oh, don't cut my throat, sir, I pleaded in terror. Pray, don't, sir. Tell us your name. Quick! Pip, sir. Once more. Give it mouth. Pip. Pip, sir. Pip, eh? You young dog. What fat cheeks you got. Darn me if I couldn't eat 'em. And if I hadn't half a mind to do it. Now looky here. Where's your mother? There, sir. He started and made a short run and stopped and looked over his shoulder. Where? There, sir. Also Georgiana. That's my mother. Oh. Is that your father next to your mother? Yes, sir. Him too, late of this parish. Well, who do you live with, supposing you're kindly let to live, which I hadn't made up my mind about? My sister, sir, Mrs. Joe Gardry, wife of Joe Gardry, the blacksmith, sir. Blacksmith, eh? Blacksmith. Now, looky here. The question being whether you're to be let to live. You know what a file is? Yes, sir. And you know what whittles is? Yes, sir. All right. If you go and bring me back a file and some whittles, I might be inclined to let you live. Rather than being terrified, I'm delighted to say my boys enjoyed meeting Magwitch very, very much. I also loved to walk around the streets of London. The London streets would often give me ideas for stories, but also I would go out and collect characters. Some of my most famous characters I have developed because I have been out and about on the busy streets of London. Characters like Harold Skimpole, Fob from Bleak House, Wackford Squeers, horrible schoolmaster from Nicholas Nickleby, Bumble the Beadle, who runs a baby farm, from Oliver Twist, Silas Wegg, one-legged street vendor in Our Mutual Friend, Uriah Heep, a conniving law clerk in David Copperfield, Mr. Sowerberry, undertaker from Oliver Twist, Luke Honey Thunderer, philanthropist from The Mystery of Edwin Drood, and Sari Gamp, just a nurse from Martin Chuzzlewit, and so the gentleman's dead, sir. More's the pity. I don't even know his name. But it's what we must all come to. It's as certain as being born, except we can't make our calculations so exact. Poor dear. I remember when Mr. Gamp was summoned to his long home. I see him lying there in Guy's Hospital with a penny piece in each eye and his wooden leg tucked under his left arm. I thought I should have fainted away, but I didn't. These walks through London would also show me the conditions that people lived in. My wife, Catherine, and I, we tried to use our wealth and our position to do as much good as we possibly could throughout London. It was in 1842 that I took my first tour of America. Much of it, unfortunately, I was not impressed with, I'm very sad to say, and have changed that thought. But there was one highlight of that tour, and that was visiting the mills in Lowell, Massachusetts. This building I speak to, which from this evening, this was one of the first mills that Mr. Francis Cabot Lowell was involved in, and I visited his mills in the city of Lowell, and to me, it was a wonder. I stepped off the train, there was dirty snow, but that only highlighted how clean a city it was. My impressions of the mills at Lowell were that they had been taken out of a box just before my arrival and set up. They were so well thought out, so clean. I was impressed with the young women, the mill girls as they were called. They were fairly well paid for the time. They were clean, they were healthy, they had excellent manners. I also recall I saw very few children in Lowell being used at the mills. I came to learn that here in America there were laws, age laws, number of hours a child could work during the week, number of months a child could be employed. We had none of this sort of thing in early London. My American notes for general circulation refer to several things I was impressed with. First of all, the workers seemed to be paid a fair wage. Many of them had bank accounts and savings. Every boarding house I visited had a working piano in it, and I was assured it was used on a regular basis. There was a circulating library for the workers at the mill, and the workers put out a publication, the Lowell Offering. I was quite impressed with the mills in Lowell. I bought several of the publications, took it with me throughout my tour of America. It was so different from England. It is no great surprise that the books I wrote, I tried to tackle issues of social injustice, highlighting poverty, stratification between the classes, and of course, child use as labor and child abuse. I tried to use my writings and these speeches I give to raise the awareness in the public of the unjust economic and social conditions that we lived in during my time. In Oliver Twist, I say, bleak, dark, piercing cold, it was a night for the well-housed and fed to draw round the bright fire and thank God they were at home, and for the homeless, starving wretch to lay him down and die. In May of 1843, I attended a fundraising dinner in the city of Manchester, a mill town, much like Lowell, Massachusetts was a mill town, but oh, so very different. I was there to raise money for the elderly and the infirmed, impoverished people, and I looked around at my audience that evening, and it was full of older, white gentlemen. And it occurred to me that I was looking at the very men who had made their fortunes upon the backs of the poor and destitute. I wrote to a friend at the time describing these men as sleek, slobbering, bow-paunched, overfed, apoplectic, snorting cattle. The breadth of poverty that I saw in industrial Manchester was chilling, and it made me want to do something. I wanted to deal, as I said at the time, a sledgehammer blow for the poor man's child. Could I not use my writing to kindle in people thoughts of kindness? And so I wrote, in just 6 weeks' time, A Christmas Carol. Now up rose Mrs. Cratchit, turned out bravely in ribbons, who, along with Miss Belinda Cratchit, spread the tablecloth. Master Peter Cratchit stirred a saucepan full of potatoes with great vigor, managing to get the corners of his immense collar, Bob's private property, into his mouth. The two youngest Cratchits came tearing in from the street, stating they had smelled the goose and known it for their own. "Why, whatever is keeping your father, then? And Martha? She weren't this late last year by half an hour." "Here's Martha, mother, Martha! Oh, Martha, there is such a goose!" "Bless you, my dear, how late you are!" "We'd a good deal of work to do yesterday, mother, and had to clean up this morning." "Never you mind, so long as you've come." No, Martha, look, Father's coming." "Hide, Martha, hide!" And so Martha hid. In came Bob Cratchit, 3 feet of comforter, exclusive of fringe, hanging before him. Upon his shoulders he bore Tiny Tim. Oh, alas, poor Tim. He carried a small wooden crutch, and his leg was supported by an iron brace. "Merry Christmas, my dears. Why, where's our Martha?" "Oh, not coming. Not coming. Not coming upon Christmas Day." Martha didn't like to see him so disturbed in jest, so she came rushing over into his arms. The two youngest Cratchits bustled Tim off so he might hear the pudding singing in the copper. "How is Tim in church today, then?" "Oh, as good as gold." "No, better. He gets so funny sitting there by himself, and he thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me coming home he hoped people in church saw him, because he is a cripple, and it might be pleasant for them to remember on Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see." "Spirit," said Scrooge, "tell me, will the little boy live?" The ghost of Christmas present looked into the distance. "I see a carefully preserved crutch in a abandoned chimney corner. If these shadows are not changed, the boy will die." "No, Spirit, say he will live, say he will live." "If these shadows remain unaltered, none other of my kind will find this child here." "But what of that? If he were like to die, he had better do so, and decrease the surplus population. Oh, man, if man you be in heart, forego that wicked cant until you know what the surplus is and where it is. It may be in the eyes of heaven you are more fit to die than millions like this poor man's child." His sturdy little crutch being heard upon the floor, Tiny Tim returned. Bob rolled up his shirt sleeves, as though anything could make them more dilapidated, poor fellow, and mixed a concoction of gin and lemon and oranges and set it upon the hob to warm. Master Peter and the two youngest Cratchits brought in the Christmas goose in great procession, and once it arrived, well, everything became so busy you would have thought that a goose was the rarest of all birds. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy hissing hot. Belinda sweetened up the apple sauce. Martha dusted off the plates, and the youngest Cratchits set out chairs for everyone, and mounting their posts, crammed spoons into their mouths so they would not call out for goose before it were their turn to be served. When all was ready, Mrs. Cratchit looked along the edge of her carving knife before plunging it into the goose. Oh, but when she did, such a gush of steam and stuffing came forth that there was a delighted murmur all around the board, and even Tiny Tim, much excited by the two youngest Cratchits, pounded upon the table and feebly cried, "Hurrah!" It was a wonderful goose, but now Mrs. Cratchit rose, not wanting to bear witness, to go and fetch the Christmas pudding. Oh, suppose that it's not quite ready. Suppose that it breaks in being turned out. Suppose someone snuck over the back wall and stole it while we were making merry with the goose. A supposition at which the two youngest Cratchits grew livid. A great deal of steam. In came Mrs. Cratchit, flushed and proud, bearing the pudding before her like a speckled cannonball, bedight with a sprig of holly. Mrs. Cratchit, I do believe this is your greatest success since our marriage. It was a wonderful pudding, and if it was a small pudding for so many people, no one mentioned it. Bob proposed a toast. God bless us, my dears, every one. God bless us, every one. And now I give you the founder of the feast, Mr. Scrooge. The founder of the feast, Mr. Scrooge. Ah! The founder of the feast, indeed. I would like to give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have good appetite for it. My dear, the children. Christmas Day. It should be Christmas, on which I have to drink the health of an odious and stingy man like Ebenezer Scrooge. Oh, you know he is, Robert. No one knows it better than you do, poor fellow. My dear, Christmas Day. The children. Christmas Day. Well, I shall drink a toast for the day's sake, and yours, not for his. A very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt. To Mr. Scrooge. It took 10 minutes for the gloom that Scrooge's name brought on to dissipate. Then they were 10 times merrier than before. There was no high mark in this. They were not a handsome family, but they loved one another and were well pleased with one another. And Scrooge's eye was upon them as they disappeared from view. I wrote that book, had it published in 6 weeks, and it had quite an amazing success. But I have always loved Christmas time. My words are the words of Fred. I have always thought of Christmas time when it's come round as a good time, a kind, gentle, benevolent time, the one time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women open their shut-up hearts freely and treat those below them as fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, although it has never put a scrap of gold nor silver in my pocket, I believe it has done me good and will do me good, and I say, God bless it. Christmas Carol was written with so many things in mind. The ways of Christmas at the time in Victorian England had mostly been forgotten. Many of the celebrations you find in my little novella were no longer being celebrated, but that book helped to recharge Christmas in England and throughout the world. This small book, more than any other book that I wrote, reminds people of who they could be. My visit to America and to the Lowell mills showed me that industry and humanity could work together. And I wrote Christmas Carol to remind people of that. I am the author of 14 and a half novels, 5 novellas. 20 years I've been a publisher and magazine editor, hundreds of articles and speeches, and all of that came from a child's dream. A dream of happiness as a child, and a desire for that happiness never to dissipate. My battle against poverty, against the ill treatment of people, lasted me throughout my life. I tried very much to recapture that early joy that I had. It is a far, far better thing I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known. I thank you all for joining me this evening, and I thank especially the Charles River Museum of Industry and Innovation for hosting my lecture this evening. The pain of parting is nothing to the joy of meeting again. And as for Scrooge, he was as good as his word. He became as good a man, as good a master, as good a friend as the good old city ever knew. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was like a second father. And it was often said of Scrooge, he knew how to keep Christmas well. If any man alive possessed that knowledge, may that truly be said of all of us. And as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, every one.
Thank you, JT. That was wonderful. I always learn when I listen to you. I always enjoy listening to you perform.
Thank you.
I'm going to bring up some questions that my coworker Anna has compiled for me to ask you.
Wonderful.
While I do that, why don't you tell everybody where to go to see a list of your future and upcoming performances?
Wonderful. So I work for an organization called the Actors Company. We specialize in bringing literary and historical figures to life. That is mostly due to the wonderful work of my partner, Marcy Diamond, who books me and manages my life somehow. Marcy, I thank you for all of that. If you'd like to know more about the Actors Company, please friend us on Facebook. It's called the Actors Company. You'll know it's us. There are a couple of Actors Companies out there, but you'll usually see my face associated with it and some videos that we like to share with people. And you can check out my schedule at my website, jtturner.org. And I want to make a special invitation. This coming Sunday evening at 7 p.m., I will be performing as Charles Dickens in a one-man version of A Christmas Carol. And we're sponsored by First Parish Church, right here in Waltham, Massachusetts. Wonderful church. It's on a donation basis, and if you can donate something, wonderful. If not, please just come and enjoy this wonderful story. This year is the 25th year I have been doing my solo version of A Christmas Carol, so I hope you will join us. You can get that information on our Facebook page, or you can check out First Parish Waltham Unitarian Universalist Church. Thank you. Thank you for letting me share that with everyone.
Thank you. So I have a question to start off with.
Sure.
How does working in a historical setting like this affect how you perform?
Oh, I love it. I love it. There is something about being in a setting like this, especially for a piece like A Christmas Carol, that is just perfect. You did a beautiful job in your introduction of mentioning how Scrooge is machine-like. And having this setting, I'm always jealous every year. You do a wonderful full-cast version of Christmas Carol in this terrific space, and it's just such a great setting. And it is really, it was written in 43. It was a time when Dickens and all of the world was struggling with this idea of advancement, but the humanity not quite keeping up with the advancement. So to bring Dickens here to a mill, and of course we know he was so impressed with the Lowell mills, and to come to this sort of early rendition of what those mills might be, it's just a great setting. So thank you for having me in.
Sure, and it's a great joy to have that production, but I should also mention Marcy Diamond does a great tea with Mrs. Dickens, which like your better half gets to come and do your better half.
And she's wonderful. So my partner Marcy does do tea with Mrs. Dickens. We worked on that piece for a while. True story, we developed tea with Mrs. Dickens because I was so overbooked with productions of A Christmas Carol one year, and this very sweet group said, will you come and do a show for us? And we couldn't, we were too booked. But then I said to Marcy, go ahead and say yes, and we'll figure something out. And I sat down with her and we decided to develop Tea with Mrs. Dickens. That is a fun, very lighthearted show. She goes over a lot of the things in Victorian England that were used to celebrate Christmas at the time, which is really interesting. And she's just such a wonderful and engaging performer. So,
she is. And
yes,
it's
she's
an
been
audience
in this
favorite.
space.
Yes,
yeah.
So she gets to perform in this space, you get to perform in this space, and it's great to reutilize and revision this space. It's good to have exhibits here of the past, but also to bring the past alive, which
Yes.
you and Marcy do for us.
Yes.
So we don't have any questions yet, but I will, one just came through. Christina Rose, I'd love to know how a piece like this is written, assembled, this kind of historical lecture. Does JT work alone as an actor, or do you work with a director?
Great question. So thank you, Christina. I personally tend to work by myself. So I've been doing solo pieces for quite a few years now. And this particular piece, I have 3 different pieces about Dickens. This is a newer one for me. The museum was nice enough to reach out to me and said, well, we'd like you to come and do something by Charles Dickens, but we really want to look at the connections between him and Lowell, because it's the Lowell Mill Talks that I'm a part of this evening. So I know an awful lot about Dickens and could do an awful lot about his life, but I assembled it with the thought of a couple things. I love telling the story of how he always wanted to be an actor, and I loved sharing the point of his life that changed everything, which was going to work in Warren's blacking factory. He saw firsthand the conditions there. Those conditions haunted him the rest of his life. He worked very hard. He wasn't always successful. He had some failures along the way. Money was tight sometimes, but he was driven. He was driven by the moments that he pushed himself through those conditions. He never forgot where he came from, and that was really what sort of propelled me with this. That was a really long answer, Christina, sorry. Short version is I self-direct because I've been doing this sort of thing for a long time now. Thank you for asking that question.
Okay, I have another question.
Yes.
How do you know off the top of your head the number of characters he created total, and what are your top 3?
I don't know how many total characters he has. I know when I do the one-man version of Christmas Carol, it works out to be something like a performance of 8 men, 6 women, 5 ghosts, and I think 5 or 6 children. And that's just part of one of his stories. Right. Hundreds and hundreds of really interesting characters. He would keep lists and lists of names and character ideas from people he would meet socially, but especially from his walks around London. So I have no idea how many characters. What a wonderful question. Maybe someday now I'll try and figure that out.
Now, top 3 to perform.
Ebenezer Scrooge, because he has this beautiful arc. You know, you call someone a Scrooge, people think, oh, they're really mean and nasty. That's not the way the story goes. The story goes, he has this redemption and he's really kind and generous. Ebenezer Scrooge is number 1. Mr. Micawber, because I love how sentimental Mr. Micawber is, and he also, if you read David Copperfield, has this wonderful comeback story in it. Third character, it has to be, maybe it's a toss-up. No, I'll go with Fred. Fred's speech and the way Fred talks about Christmas is the way Dickens would talk about Christmas. To me, Fred and Fezziwig, to a large extent, were a combination of Dickens that he split apart a little bit and put in Christmas Carol. So those are my favorites.
Oh, okay, great. That's excellent. Robin Capello, how did theater in your school youth add value to your life is her question.
That's great. So I'm hoping you're asking me as a performer. I'll go with that. When I was young, I was painfully, horribly shy. I was so shy that the Good Sisters of St. Leo's had special classes on Saturdays for kids that didn't talk very well in class, who wouldn't speak up. And after going to these classes on a Saturday, after about a month, the principal called my mother and said, "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Turner, but we have to give up on your son. He's never, ever going to be able to speak properly in public." So my mother didn't pay attention to that particular nun, and neither did I, and I discovered theater. And for me, who is a really shy child and reticent about a lot of things, and still am, but theater was where I could blossom. Theater was where I could put on a different suit of clothes and everything in me could come out in this safety net. So for me, when I was first cast as a child in a play and I performed and got this positive feedback, it changed the trajectory of my life literally forever. So my involvement with theater, school theater, growing up, made all the difference in the world. Nowadays, when I broadcast, because we're all at home, when I broadcast into different schools, children will ask me, what advice do you have for an actor? And I always say, just go ahead and try it. Be in your school play, do the ridiculous parts, test out the voices. If there's a community theater, be involved in that, because great as formal education in something is, going and just doing it and living it, to me, makes all the difference in the world. So.
Yeah, I agree. It's addictive being in the theater.
Yes.
Because it's immersive. You're backstage and there's all these smells of dust that have been on those walls for years, and you walk out on those planks, on the boards that have been painted over and over again, and they're a little sticky because someone had to tap dance. And then the godlike knowledge that you have as the performer, knowing that what you're going to say next is going to have a room full of people laughing or crying. Yeah. And you know what you're going to do is good, and they're going to emote, and everyone in theater's missing that right now. Yes. And so yes. Yeah, I've been there. I totally get it. But let's move on to the next question.
All right.
Before I talk my head off. Cynthia Whitty. Will the performance of a Christmas Carol be virtual? I assume she is talking about Sundays.
Yes.
Yes.
And so the answer, Cynthia, is yes. It will be broadcast on Zoom. You register for it with the church. You'll find the link on Facebook or on the church webpage. And again, it's free. It lasts about an hour, but it is virtual. It's broadcast over Zoom. It's funny, we started doing broadcasts, our company started doing broadcasts maybe 3 years ago. And we did it so we could reach more schools. We broadcast our shows to remote schools in Nunavut, Canada, as close to the Arctic Circle as you can get, and in challenge communities in California, and really all over the world. So when the pandemic hit, we were very fortunate because we understood Zoom and how to do it. And this month, I miss so much acting with a bunch of actors. I'm normally at North Shore Music Theater doing their big splashy production in addition to my one-man show. But Zoom and being remote is what allows us to do the shows this month. And we have, I'm telling Christmas Carol as a story 25 times this month. And I wouldn't be able to do that without the wonders of Zoom. So again, Cynthia, a really long answer, I'm sorry. It'll be on Zoom. Thank you for asking.
And the name of the church again is the First
Parish in Waltham. It's a Unitarian Universalist Church.
So you just have to Google it and you'll find their website.
Waltham. Yep, or check out Actors Company on Facebook. We have the links right there.
Now, you just mentioned your other work. You do more than Dickens.
Absolutely.
And the things you do for schools, like if there is an educator out there that would like to contact you about, first explain the other characters and the other work you do, and,
sure.
And how do they contact you if they want to see you in their schoolroom?
So we specialize in literary historical characters. So I'm coming to you this evening as Charles Dickens. We also have William Shakespeare, Benjamin Franklin, the American poet Robert Frost, Aesop, the Greek fable teller, characters like that, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and most recently our newest character is John Muir, the environmentalist. And you can reach out to us at the Actors Company, and we broadcast right into the schoolroom, and especially nowadays with so many classes being remote or being uncomfortable with bringing a physical person into the space. It's a great way for us to bring these characters to life safely for your classrooms. So again, Actors Company, reach out to Marcy Diamond, and we'd be happy to talk to you about bringing one of our stories to you.
It's great. Now I have another question as we wait to see if we have any more questions coming in.
Okay.
Of the adaptations of A Christmas Carol. Now this is you as a viewer, not as an actor. Do you have a favorite film or TV adaptation of A Christmas Carol?
I do.
Yes.
I do. My personal favorite is George C. Scott playing Scrooge. That's my favorite version of A Christmas Carol. I have a fondness for two others. The original Alistair Sim, old black and white one.
Yes.
Amazing. And the Muppet Christmas Carol should not be scoffed at. Quite the contrary.
I was watching it the other day, and I was wondering, is he going to bring up the Muppet Christmas Carol? Just the way, I mean, it doesn't have the whole story, but the way that they weave, Waldorf and Statler.
Sure.
And as the ghost, not one Marley, but two Marleys, and Rizzo the rat, it just brings the whole, for kids, it lightens everything. Because he's looking for his jelly beans or this, that, and the other part.
The great thing, in my opinion, about A Christmas Carol, the beauty of it is you can do it in all sorts of ways, and it still carries this wonderful weight with it. Yeah. So when I'm up at North Shore Music Theater, wonderful production, a cast of 40, full orchestra, Marley flies over the audience, fireworks are being shot off, fantastic, amazing, and a tremendous story brought to life. And when I do this solo, not to be immodest, but I'm going to be, I feel like the story still resonates with people. And I feel the same thing about the Muppets. I think, yes, it's the Muppets, but there's this wonder about this story of redemption that is like nothing else in the world.
Yes, I even like Bill Murray's Scrooged.
Absolutely.
It's they made it modern, and yet they still had all the elements, they hit all the cues, and it was all there. And
Yeah.
I will watch almost any version of A Christmas Carol.
Me too. Me too. I'm a little bit of a junkie.
Oh, okay, Robin has written another question. Thank you, Robin. Does your company offer private children's lessons by Zoom or family training for public speaking?
Yes. So the answer to that, Robin, is yes. At the Actors Company, in addition to our solo performances for schools, we also do actor training. We will do that one-on-one with actors. We will work with young directors. We will work with young screenwriters sometimes in our little company. We also have, believe it or not, we teach circus arts, circus skills over Zoom these days. So there are a lot of different things we can work with people, help them along, teach them as best we can. And like everyone else, we've happily adapted to do it over Zoom in this current atmosphere. So yes, thank you for that question.
Okay, we have another question coming in. It doesn't say who's asking it yet, maybe Anna herself. What is your favorite full-length Dickens novel?
I love Christmas Carol, but you're right, that's a novella. Don't let me get away with that. It's so hard for me to pick one. In sales, quick aside, Christmas Carol, top-selling Dickens book, but a close second and a story I love is A Tale of Two Cities. I think it's great and compact and beautiful. I love David Copperfield. I love the epicness of David Copperfield. I love watching what David has to go through. That's a favorite. If you hold me down, though, it's got to be Nicholas Nickleby, because actors are in Nicholas Nickleby. And Dickens does this hysterical section. I used it at the beginning of this evening's piece. The whole section about the theatrical company and their touring, it just delights me. And Nickleby is, you know, it's got all these evil, seedy characters, as much of Dickens does, but I love that. So I didn't pick one, did I? Nor will I. I'm sorry. I love them all. I really do.
Now, when I was researching A Christmas Carol, and I found someone thankfully put a version online that was supposed to be what Dickens read, and
Yes.
that's what we use.
Yes.
And he does not use chapters. They
Yes.
are called staves.
Correct.
And would you like to go into why that it's called, what is a stave and why are they called staves?
So a stave is a reference to a musical phrase, and Dickens calls it A Christmas Carol. And he calls it a carol because he imagines it as being a song, a story, which has all these different verses to it. So if you read Christmas Carol, it's not chapter 1, it's stave 1. And they usually have little subtitles with them. And he felt like he was orchestrating these characters. That's one of the reasons he calls it A Christmas Carol.
Yeah, I don't think people really realize that there's a musical element to the whole composure of this one story that he's singing to his audience.
Exactly.
With his words, even though it's prose.
Yes.
So, let's see. I'm not seeing any more questions come through. Do you have any questions?
I know you have another question for me.
I do.
You're wondering what a blacking factory is.
Yes, please. What is blacking?
So Dickens works at Warren's Blacking Factory. It's boot blacking. It's shoe polish. And they would put this polish into these small bottles. Dickens is only 12. He's a relatively small child for 12, by the way. And his job is to take brown paper, wrap the bottle in brown paper, trim it off, tie a piece of twine on it so it didn't come off the bottle, and paste labels on it. And it would trim the brown paper and the twine. And apparently, he was kind of a hit. They put him in the window so that people walking by, shopping and doing that sort of thing, could watch this sort of entertaining, adorable little boy who does this, and never realizing that they were really looking at this tragic tragic moment in a person's life, and they would just go on with their lives, not giving it a second thought. He was always grateful that he could get a job and help his family, but it always haunted him. But that's what blacking is. It's boot polish.
Boot polish.
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, it's interesting that they're like, oh, this is entertaining to watch a child work is kind of weird.
Yep.
It's like, okay, he's a monkey. Let's put a hat on him with a fez. And
yeah.
And then what you expressed in the lecture, the shame that his father, not only was his kid working, but he was on display working.
Yeah.
That it was his kid that had to be on display. Did his father live long enough to see him perform on stage?
Absolutely. His father lives into Dickens's adulthood and Dickens's success. But his father never changes. His father is continually now approaching his son for money and constantly getting into financial trouble. And there's all these letters back and forth between father and son, just reprimanding him for the way he spends. But Dickens almost always gives in and helps him out. He had this very mixed emotion about his dad. He loved him. You read Micawber in Copperfield, and it's a sweet character. It's a character that is a train wreck, but it has these adorable qualities about it, and that was Dickens and the way he felt about his father, John.
Well, I also think his hope for his father is obviously, never ending for what he writes for Scrooge.
Yeah.
If such a horrible man in my stories can redeem himself, that's what I want for my father. I want him to find redemption,
Yes.
I would think. That would be my 2 cents. We don't seem to have any more questions. I'd like to thank our audience for participating. I'd like to thank you, JT.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me in.
And we love having you. I want to thank Michelle Weissman for being one of our camera people, and our director, Bob Perry, for being our producer and director. And if you liked this, well then please visit our YouTube channel or visit our website at charlesrivermuseum.org. And here at the Charles River Museum, we'd like to wish everybody a joyous holiday season. Thank you, and have a great evening.